So welcome. My name is Michelle Dexter. I'm the president of the Almaden Valley Community Association. And tonight we're looking forward to hearing from our U.S. Congressman Jimmy Panetta. So please save the date for next month, September 8th. Our meeting, we will have our county supervisor, Margaret Abikoga, will be here to answer all the questions. All right, that's enough for announcements. So we are honored tonight to have our District 10 council member join us each month to provide an update. So please welcome Councilmember George Casey.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everyone. I had a PowerPoint presentation that I was going to use, but apparently we're not tech ready for it. I was told to discuss the gas issue. The fact that we're no longer going to be able to use gas furnaces and the electrification phase that we're going through. Is that of any interest to you folks?
Yes.
Okay. So apologies for me having to look down here, but there is a regional government body. So first, a global comment. A lot of the decisions that are currently being made at the state level used to be made at a local level. Where that's really pronounced is with our zoning issues. And some of you that are familiar with the builders' revenue projects that have been proposed here in Almaden are intimately aware of the negative impact they can have on us. So a lot of what we used to do at a local level has been wrested away from us and now operates at the state level. There are also regional authorities that have been put together, for example, AVCA. This was done many years ago with the understanding that there are regional issues like transportation. You can't have Caltrain and just worry about what it does in one little silo. So that made sense. But as time has gone on, more and more things are moving from the regional into the state level. And so this is an example of one of those. I won't refer to the notes. So the issue is electrification. That's what we're moving towards, and the impact that's ultimately going to have on us. So it can actually be illegal 2027 and 2029 for you to even purchase a gas furnace. And that's going to have impacts, particularly for folks that are living in older homes that haven't been retrofitted. And so there's going to be a financial impact. Now there's one impact in terms of just the product itself, the gas furnace. But then there's also another hit. For example, if you're in Roseland in a 1950s home, and you've got to update your electrical panel now to accommodate the electrical appliances. So I've heard all sorts of numbers that have been thrown anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000, depending on what your situation is. I think where this is really ultimately going to hurt us also too is the small landlords that have duplexes and fourplexes. Those are small businesses, and I don't think they account for this $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 hit that they're suddenly going to take. And so that ultimately is going to get passed on. Ultimately is going to get passed on to the tenants. You know, the situation where landlords are going to be profitable. And so what happens to those units? If you're not making any money, you're not going to put more money into the units. There's not going to be more units built. So ultimately, this is going to have a negative impact on our bottom line. It's going to come into play in 2027 and ultimately 2020, past 2029. So, like I said, I had a PowerPoint presentation that was going to point out the Bay Area Air Quality Management Group. That's the regional group that is proposing this, and by law, they can pass this law, this mandate, and it's going to trickle down to us. Any questions on that issue? Yes, ma'am.
So are you suggesting that everyone has to stop using gas, or I'm assuming it means if you are putting something new in your home, it has to be electric?
Correct.
Just like the gas furnace, just like the gas.
Correct.
So that's not quite as debilitating as if everybody had to go out.
Exactly. So the comment was that this doesn't mean everyone has to go out right now and retrofit their home. What it means is after 2027 and 2029, if, for example, your gas furnace goes out, well, now you're obligated in order to update your electrical panel and move to electric. So good point. New developments that come in are all going to be holding to it, but ultimately your gas furnace is going to go out. So ultimately this is going to impact you. When that happens depends on how recently you actually updated or fixed.
Is this also for Is this also for fire, or stovetops?
Yes.
All
So,
gas.
no, yeah, they're moving away from gas completely. Yeah.
You've talked about 27 and 29, is there a difference?
Yeah, so one of them I think is for furnaces, and the other one is gas, David, you know?
Yeah. I don't really need the mic ever, but 27 is water heaters. 29 is furnaces. 31 is for large units, like apartment buildings with 100 units. And there's a website called toocostlybayarea.com if you want more information. That's TOO, costlybayarea.com. And there's a group of people that are working very hard to convince enough people of the 24 members of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, of only 4 of which are from Santa Clara County, to revisit this issue for a number of reasons. Because it's going to have a huge impact in at least 2031 on affordable housing projects that do not have the money to do these retrofits. And so when their water heater goes out, they'll either close the building or the tenants won't have hot water.
So it's another example of it sounds good, but the practical reality is the common person is going to be footing the bill, and when the rubber hits the road, there's going to be a lot of issues with this.
George,
Oh, sorry, that's
I
Gary.
am a landlord, and I have a place that's for low-income renters.
Right.
And I have been told that I need to get rid of my gas heater, and they told me that it would cost the tenant 6 times as much to have electricity, and that I have to install it, which means I will raise the rent to recover my costs, and then they will pay 6 times as much to heat the place.
That's the negative consequences that I was referring to, especially for small business owners. Also, that's what you are when you're a landlord, and who ends up footing the bill, the landlord has to pass this through, and these become less profitable business endeavors, so you have less folks involved in this. So ultimately, it's going to be a net negative in the short run. You know, maybe 15, 20, 30 years from now, as we're all used to it, it won't be much of a problem, but this is going to be, and the Santa Clara County Realtors, for example, have come out really strongly against this, and rightfully so, as an advocacy solution. I'll get to you, man, but this gentleman had a question.
What was the justification for this moving?
The question was, what was the justification for moving toward this? I mean, ultimately, at a local and state level, we're pushing climate action as a priority. So to be net neutral, I think, is ultimately the goal. So it is a climate goal that we're trying to achieve. And there's things happening on a city level too that they're trying to pursue as well.
But isn't it true that the landlord would not be able to pass it on unless a new tenant took possession of the unit? Because we have a 5% rent cap.
Well, I think he's talking about the monthly fee that they'll end up having to pay. So the tenant is responsible for their utility fees.
Okay, thanks.
Will the capacity of our electrical grid handle the additional? And reliably?
That's a great question. So in addition to this, you know, the AI boom is coming. We've got a lot of new data centers that are coming online. So the demand for energy and for electricity is going to be really pronounced. So I can't confidently say yes to you. Price will go up, and ultimately, we got to deal with PG&E, and historically speaking, they haven't been the best partner. So I can tell you I have a glass half full perspective on it.
So you're on the council,
Yes, ma'am.
and Mayor Matt Main just posted that he worked with PG&E because of the AI we're expecting to come to an agreement on supporting San Jose with the amount of increased support they would need. So you're saying no? You're saying
No, that's true. So there was a proposed San Jose municipal. So Santa Clara, for example, they have their own electricity producer.
This PG&E paying.
Well, PG&E came into this because we were pursuing that route. So now PG&E and San Jose has come into an agreement where PG&E is going to provide the infrastructure and create the infrastructure we need. We have 2 additional power lines, one coming from the south and one coming down from Almaden into northern San Jose. And so just in time for us to try to get the data centers we need to support the AI revolution, we did come into a partnership with PG&E, and ultimately I supported that with the caveat that I wanted a clear off-ramp in the contract, because PG&E has to meet on a number of milestones in order for them to, I guess, fulfill their responsibilities in the contract. And I'm skeptical that PG&E will do it. And so we have those off-roads, those off-ramps in the contract. Ultimately, if they don't fulfill it, we can go back to pursuing our own municipal power.
With those off-roads in the contract, and that, does that factor in any kind of accountability or support from CPUC or any other issues, and the impact of the federal government? As you know, they just overturned some of our climate, or every one of our climate issues on this point. Do you think that will play in as well?
I don't know. So there's the honest answer to that. I don't know. Yeah, that's, it's hard to tell. We don't know how long we're going to be dealing with the shortfalls in terms of the federal government and the policy direction that we're dealing with at the moment. And it's going to take at least a year to a couple of years for this to get rolling and for us to see whether or not PG is hitting their milestones or not. So, follow up.
Okay, I really have to say that I appreciate Matt coming out and stating which way we'll go and that we'll work with PG&E, but the issue is hope is not a strategy. And hope is not a strategy, and we have to be willing to know that they're going to play games, they're going to be slow, and it won't come in the area to where we can be compliant. So when your water heater goes out, or when your furnace starts, and today the furnaces that are being installed, I'm being told that the actual life is about 7 years for a gas furnace, so we're all kind of dead.
No, it's not impact everyone.
But how do we get everybody working to make what has to happen, rather than a statement in principle, into an action plan?
So I can tell you PG&E was motivated to make sure, because they don't want a ripple effect. They don't want other municipalities going out and starting their own municipal power plants. And San Jose being the third largest city. So this was something that they prioritized. So they came to the table motivated to get the deal done. And I can tell you that as an attorney, one of my key features, and I think benefits that I served the council, was in the meeting, you can go back and watch it, it's televised. I emphasized over and over again that the contract needs clear language what we get out of it. And I was able to review the contract before we actually signed it. And there are clear milestones that they need to achieve. And this is this is not just one project. They're doing a number of different projects throughout the city in order to achieve and create a foundation to get the power that we need. And so this is $200, $300, $400 million that they're investing into this infrastructure for us. For them, it's a drop in the bucket, of course. But I can assure you that the contract is written in a way where we unilaterally can pull out of it if we feel like they have to meet the milestones.
Remember when they said they would underground all of the utility lines and things after all the
I think
fires?
5%.
And then they just started doing advertisements and stuff?
Yeah. So she said, remember when they promised that they were going to underground all of the power lines after the fires that occurred? And I think to your point, much of that hasn't happened, and they're doing a lot of commercials, and they're marketing themselves as someone that's been a responsible steward and that achieved what they said they were going to, but they were supposed to do a lot. They have done some stuff here now and then, did a couple of things, and the little that they do, they definitely throw a party, and there's a lot of fanfare for the little that they've done. But I mean, to your point, ultimately, I think the bottom line is you don't trust PG&E either way. And I can assure you the contract is written in a way that we have a clear off-ramp, but they don't hit the milestones. That was the best I could do under the circumstances.
Aren't most of our generating plants gas-fired turbines?
I don't know if that's the case, no. I don't know.
We're not burning coal.
No, they're not burning
Not
coal.
nuclear anymore.
Yeah, that's actually outside of my area of expertise. I can follow up. I know that we need the capacity to accommodate, for example, the data centers and what's coming in. But I don't know.
Question for you, Jim.
Yes, sir.
Just to back you up a little bit there, data centers, where is the energy going to come from that? It's an enormous amount of energy required for a data center.
Yeah.
It's astronomical. So where are we with that? We know Northern California is an independent energy producing region. We don't import, we export. But where is that energy
say as a business model for us, they don't require many services, it's gonna be a big tax revenue generator for us. And they don't require a lot of services, so in that sense, it's an attractive deal for us. But that's what this conversation with PG&E's contract was, because we have 2 power lines coming in from the
Right,
south and
that's
one
the
from the
grid
north.
is a whole nother issue, we don't
Yeah.
have the grid.
Well, the grid is being updated. It is at the moment, I forget the name of the company we're working with. And it's 2 lines that are coming up, one from South San Jose up to Coyote Valley, and another one coming down from Almaden Valley down into San Jose. It's
So
also
what
being-
about geothermal, since we've got geothermal all over?
Yeah. Again, outside of my wheelhouse, I'm not looking to pursue.
You talked about how we're having more power for AI. How about power for the new furnaces and the new stovetops? Is that all gonna be
Yeah, it's all part of
put
it.
into that?
Yeah. I hate to make it even worse, but the big problem we're having right now with PG&E is, for example, any new project that comes online is taking months to come out. So if you have a permit for new development, or even your home, for example, if you have an ADU that you want to put up and get PG&E to come out, that's going to be 6 months, 8 months, potentially a year before they'll actually come out and do it. So there's no rosy, immediate situation for in the near future, but at some point we'll come out of this. Great question. Yes, sir.
Hi, George. The Almaden Research Center was going to be closed. Do you know what the plan is, or is it going to be a data center? Or I worked for IBM for 40 years, so I don't even know.
Yeah, Jane, this is we had this conversation a week or 2 ago. So it's my understanding that it's for sale. Okay. And in addition to the site itself, the buildings themselves, there's hundreds of acres that are also right over there. And it's my understanding that the intent is to have it separate the land from the building. But I have no news in terms of whether or not someone's actually bid on it, what type of response they get for the market. So IBM is selling also. Yeah. But I don't know if for how much, I don't know if it's a popular site. I think Jay had a great idea to have an incubator of some sort there that the city would come in, but the city doesn't have money.
No, it's a beautiful facility, and there's a lot of leading-edge technology up there. I was part of it, luckily, but I was just curious.
So you had a great commute, huh?
Yeah, I did. I really did. Thank you, Dad.
Will the post office ever open?
See, that's the guy you got to talk to about the post office. Our intrepid Congressman Jimmy Panetta is here. He'll feel that one.
I have a question about the builder's remedy in that property out there.
Okay.
It's county.
Right.
Question about the property or the subject to the builder's remedy.
The Harry Road project?
So it's county property right now.
Correct.
Will the city annex that at some point for property value income or?
Well, I don't know. Historically, that has been the case. But that conversation generally happens early on, and there's an understanding that the city will annex it. These builders remedy projects are a bit different. It's created a contentious relationship between the developer and the municipalities. So it's outside of urban growth boundary. And so it's sort of a chicken before the egg. There's a question whether or not they're gonna have their own septic tanks.
Yes.
So they need to be annexed for, they can plug into our sewage system.
Right.
And so I don't know that that's gonna happen. And so if they've got septic tanks out there, I don't know that they'll also.
Is there a negotiating point there? Is there, if the city were to annex it, would it change the builder's remedy proposition if it were already, no?
No, well, the
developer muscle them back a little bit.
Yeah, so she's saying, is there an opportunity for us to negotiate with the developer based on this idea that they're gonna be annexed and the benefit that they would receive for it? Is there some?
Correct.
When you say negotiation, you mean them building less units or?
Less than, for instance, some cities will ask the developer to put money or land aside for a soccer field to support
community development.
fire. Yes.
So, as I mentioned earlier on, the state is resting a lot of local control over the municipalities. And so this building remedy is a prime example of that. So the developer doesn't have to do any of that. So by right, effectively, they can develop without having to provide the community benefits in the past that they would have negotiated for the municipality.
I just wanted to point out that the builder's remedy in this case doesn't have to apply if the county doesn't want it to apply, because the builder's remedy provided for some exceptions if the property is zoned agriculture and if it's got two sides that are either for conservation or also zoned for agriculture. But the county needs to respond to the developer in written language that this doesn't apply. And as far as I know, so far the county has not done that, but if you're interested, pressure on the county could be made to say, hey, tell them the builder's remedy doesn't apply. I think the county is a little concerned that they don't want to be sued and stuff. And also, even if the builder gets, his plans through, some hurdles because of the builder's remedy, it doesn't necessarily mean that the county has to let them build it. That's my understanding.
I hate to disagree with you. Okay. So it's my understanding that the builder's remedy is meant to be punitive against municipalities that don't turn in their housing element. And so the local zoning ordinances or rules don't apply. It eliminates any of the zoning requirements.
But there are exceptions. Only if certain cases apply. In like the Harry Road case,
in the Harry Road case, because the property is zoned agriculture and on two sides it's agriculture, the builder's remedy law, whatever it was, makes an exception for that. The builder's remedy doesn't have to apply if the county will write it in language, written language to the developer.
Something.
And there are also other exceptions where they say that the builder's remedy doesn't apply. But in this case, this large property south of Harry Road, that would.
I hope you're right. That would be a safe exchange.
The person to be putting this on is not you, it's our county supervisor, who will be our speaker next month. The second Monday of next month, she'll be our featured speaker. So please come talk directly with her. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yes, she made a point that's going to be after the vote. Ultimately, regardless of whether or not this gentleman, I hope you're right, there's going to be an EIR process, which is a CEQA process, which is environmental. Basically, any elected official has to have an informed decision of all the negative impacts or potential environmental impacts. This EIR document is where you can voice your concerns. And none is too small, none is too big. It's the only way that ultimately, after the EIR process, you can litigate this petition. So unless you bring up a complaint or an issue in the EIR, you can't ultimately retroactively litigate it. So if you have concerns about this project, get it into the EIR document.
I thought EIR was not required on builder's remedy.
It is.
Oh, that's good
Yeah.
to know.
But she said, I thought EIR wasn't required. CEQA was still part of the builder's remedy process. And again, I would encourage all of you to get on the email list for the county and the project and make sure you submit your comment specifically about the project and where you feel that it's going to be impacting the community negatively with traffic.
For the 28th?
Yeah, I would tell you to do it tonight, tomorrow, reach out. You can just send your email into wherever the planner is responsible for the project and tell them you want to include that comment in the EIR.
I think it's important to note this is Monday morning quarterbacking as a councilman for the city. The reason why we had builders remedy is because neither the city nor the county met their housing numbers. We don't have enough houses in California, and what we tend to do as citizens is complain when something's in our backyard, but we don't proactively try to encourage building in a state that is sorely in need of more housing.
It's
So now we have builders remedy.
Yeah, so more specifically, it wasn't that we didn't build enough housing. Every general plan has a housing element, and it was the responsibility of every municipality every 8 years to update their housing element to accommodate whatever the state said you needed to do in terms of building housing. For example, San Jose is supposed to build 62,000 units over that 8-year period. So the municipality has to identify space within its borders to accommodate that. So that document, if you don't turn that document in on time and it's not certified, the moment it's late, the day after it's late, you can apply for a builder's remedy project.
Right, so I feel like I want to hold the city accountable.
Well, no,
In this case, the county.
No,
But
The county was even worse. So the city was roughly a year late. I think the county was the last one in the state to turn theirs, and I think there were 2 years plus late in turning their crossing on. So that window, that entire window, 2.5 years roughly, was an opportunity when to file a builder's remedy project. And I don't want to add more angst to this, but there's roughly 1,400 units that have been proposed for builders remedy projects in the Morgan Hill area. So you know this back road has often been used as a cut through for folks. So you can imagine when there's 1,400 units in Morgan Hill, in addition to the units that are being proposed here on our side, the negative impact in terms of traffic that's going to have on us if everyone goes through those units that they're shooting for.
The parking, one listener noticed that the fence at the parking lot on Almaden and Camden has been changed. Is there any plans or new plans for that space?
Not that I'm aware of. There have been a number of things proposed there. It's my understanding it's a BTA site. For years, folks, so just, I'm sure you guys are aware of this, Almaden is not viewed in the best light in the rest of the city. They've tried to build a EIH or some sort of affordable housing project or a homeless shelter on that site for years. And it's to give Almaden, so Almaden can eat its medicine, what's been said to me over the years, but nothing's been proposed. I can't think of anything that's been proposed. It's just may have been maintenance-wise they built up. But I'm unaware of anything happening there.
Regarding the impending gas appliance ban, are we doing anything, and are your fellow council members doing anything to get the word out to the wider community? Or is particularly this responder has regarding the need to upgrade panels, and if you have underground utilities, the cost and disruption associated with that. What sort of communications efforts are being made to be sure that people know what's possibly going to happen?
So if you type in REACH code and San Jose does have on our energy site information about what San Jose is actually proposing. So the regional groups can impose what they want, the state can impose what they want, and then the city can actually go further. And so the city of San Jose has actually imposed a bit further too. It's very complex. There's a webinar that's on the site as well that'll update you. But the city of San Jose has also set money aside. I think it's $2.5 million now, and I think they're going to refill that when it runs out to sort of offset the cost for San Jose residents that this applies to. So it's if you need your election retrofit. So San Jose is getting the word out. I don't know if you haven't heard about it, but the REACH code is San Jose's version of this. And we do have money set aside for folks that they can apply if this applies to them. So whether you have the gas pumps are the big things that are coming out right now, whether you have an AC unit or a furnace, they want you to upgrade to the gas pump. And then the electrification, forget the terminology that's used, so that you can plug your EV in or you need to do your panel. So that's roughly $2,000 to $3,000 to do that, and there is a grant available in San Jose to offset those costs for you. So I would look up REACH code San Jose. There's a webinar and all sorts of information available there. Is that all?
We appreciate that very much. Thank you all for engaging. So now, here to introduce our guest speaker for the evening is Jane Fromer from our program team.
Thank you, George, for fielding all those questions. We have an unusual confluence of access to our various levels of government this month and next month. Tonight being city and federal, and next month being county. So portion your questions and your concerns for each of those three organizations and direct them appropriately. So tonight, Representative Jimmy Panetta is with us. He's arrived. I'll give you a brief bio on him, and then I'll turn the mic over to him because he'll be presenting to you, and then I'm sure you've all come with questions, particularly about the post office. Jimmy, that's a heads up for you. Yes. Jimmy Panetta was born in Washington, D.C., the son of former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta. He was raised on California's Central Coast. His education started at Monterey Peninsula College and then segued to a bachelor's in international relations from UC Davis and a law degree from Santa Clara University. He served in the military as an intelligence officer in the U.S. Navy Reserve for 8 years, serving in Afghanistan in 2007 and receiving a Bronze Star. His career started as a deputy district attorney in Alameda County and then segued to the Monterey County. His congressional career started in 2016 with election to Congress, then California's 20th district. It's now been redrawn as the 19th district in 2023. That's us. The 19th district covers southeast San Jose and large portions of the Central Coast, including Monterey, Santa Cruz, and Paso Robles. Panetta is currently serving his 5th term in the U.S. House of Representatives. He holds the role of Chief Deputy Whip in the 119th Congress. He is on the House committees on Ways and Means, Budget, and Armed Services. Don't know how you do that. Okay, you're going to tell us. Among his focus areas are affordable housing, immigration reform, healthcare access, environmental conservation, agriculture, gun violence prevention, veterans benefits, and a fair tax code. Representative Panetta.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Good evening, everybody. Hey, good. It's nice to be here, and thank you for this opportunity. Let me also give a shout out to Councilman Casey. I thought I had it tough in Congress. Some of those issues you were dealing with. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for your service. Thank you for willing to be a public servant, especially in this time. Let me also take this time to thank all of you for being here. It definitely says a lot about the Almaden Valley community that so many people would come out on a Monday evening to basically do what is necessary, not just in this community, but in our democracy, and to get engaged, be engaged, and to stay engaged, especially now. Obviously, when you turn on the TV and you see what's going on in Congress, you would rather be here at a community event. I understand that. It's not easy, it's tough, but public service is tough. And that is what I've continued to do throughout my time as a U.S. representative. As you heard, I represent the 19th Congressional District. This is my 5th term in Congress. I started back in 2017 with the 20th Congressional District, but after redistricting, they made it the 19th. They sort of, my district went from looking like this, very compact and made some sense, to then kind of basically digging into it and making it look like this. And that it goes all the way from, the most northern point is Lake Cunningham, Calabunga, I guess it's called now, Raging Waters when I was growing up. Then south through the neighborhoods in South San Jose that it goes through. Evergreen, Silver Creek, Edenvale, Santa Teresa, Blossom Valley, Almaden Valley, Coyote Valley. Then up and over the hill into Santa Cruz, all of Santa Cruz except Watsonville, that got gerrymandered out. Then down the Monterey County coastline all the way to Cambria in northern San Luis Obispo County. You hit that, and then you take a hard turn east, and your district goes all the way out to the border with Kern County, if you can believe that. Yeah, with the Atascadero being the most southern district. That was the Independent Redistricting Commission that decided to do that. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, you live in one of the most beautiful congressional districts in the nation. We have a lot of beauty. We have a tremendous amount of bounty. Today I visited a semiconductor chip factory here in South San Jose. As I say, we got semiconductor chips and we got cow chips in our district, as you've heard me say. It is an amazing district. And I'm very, very proud and honored and absolutely humbled to represent because of its diversity, because of its dynamism, because of its geography, because of how many interests there are in the 19th Congressional District, politically as well. But it's also a district in which what I've realized in the last 2 years and 7 months, 2 weeks that I've been in this position is that the people of this congressional district want results. They want their members to show up, to speak up, and to step up when to making sure that they serve them in an appropriate manner. And that's what I feel I've done as the 19th Congressional District. And the way I do that in this position, I go through 3 legs of the stool. Passing legislation that's relevant to this district, bringing in federal funding that's impactful to this district, and making sure that if you have any problems with the federal government, with casework, IRS, Social Security, VA issues, immigration issues, Medicare issues, please know that you can come to my office. You can reach out to my offices. I'm probably one of the few congressional members that has 4 district offices. I have to, because I wouldn't expect you in South San Jose and Almaden Valley to go all the way up into Santa Cruz. And I wouldn't expect vice versa. I wouldn't expect Monterey to go to Santa Cruz and vice versa. I wouldn't expect people in Paso Robles to go up to Monterey for service. So I have district offices in all 4 areas, including right here at 841 Blossom Hill Road, where I have Alyssa Garcia Marquez, where Alyssa, she stepped down. She runs that office with Alice Yu, who we just hired, and Emmanuel Garcia as my district director as well. Thank you. And they do, I believe, an amazing job making sure not only do we answer the phones, we respond to you and we serve you. My job is to make government work for you. I cannot stress that enough. Now, in regards to that, one of the things that we have purview over, obviously, is the post office. An awful tragedy that had happened with the person who drove into the vehicle into the post office and what's happening. It's really too bad. But obviously, when it comes to post offices, you call me. And so what we did right away, and hopefully some of you got my email that basically showed what I did right away, and that I wrote this letter that's out there on my table to the U.S. Postal Service saying, get your butt in gear, and started figuring out how we open up the Almaden Valley Post Office. That's what this is a start of. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, one of the toughest parts of this job is making bureaucracies work, okay? And as I tell my staff, you keep your foot on their throats and you never let up until the job is done. That's exactly how you have to deal with the federal bureaucracies. We've gotten pretty good at it. Post offices are very tough because they're a little slow, as you can imagine, a little confusion going on at the federal level up there at the USPS, but it's my job to make them do their job. We've had a number of issues with post offices, from anything from a fire over in Brookdale up in the San Lorenzo Valley to a flagpole that wasn't flying its flag, those types of issues. And so these are the types of things that we're continuing to work on, especially when it comes to right here in Almaden Valley. And what this letter says, basically tells them to basically give us a timeline for full repairs. It asks them to expand pickup hours to allow Almaden Valley Post Office customers to collect their mail during full operating hours at the Willow Glen Post Office. And it says that you better keep in contact with me every single step of the way. So this was just sent. We will continue to follow up, and we will not let up our foot off the USPS until the post office is fixed. It's not going to happen overnight. I'm going to be honest with you. I wouldn't want to set any expectations. It's not going to happen overnight, but please know that we will continue to grind on them and push them and get them to do their job for us here in Almaden Valley. And a big part of this is showing up. And it's basically any job to me, as I tell my 2 daughters who are in college, any job at 75% of it is just showing up. This job is 95% of it. That's why I make it a prerogative to get out and about throughout the district. And I gotta tell you, I love Highway 101. Up and down Highway 101, up and down Highway 1. I have to leave my district to go back to our district. And when I'm home in the district, I'm not home. I'm out and about the district. That includes the 20 town halls that I've done, and it includes the many office hours that I hope you get those emails for, that I do specifically right here in San Jose, because I think it's important here in San Jose for members of the public to understand that their federal representative, at least in the 19th Congressional District, not only shows up, but I listen up, and I will help you with any federal issues that I have. Now look, in the congressional district right now, really across the country, times are tough for people. Like I said, a lot of dysfunction, a lot of divisiveness. There's a lot of decisions that are being made at the federal level that are leading to a lot of uncertainty. And it really kind of weighs on people. It brings people down. And you start to get questions about what is the future of our democracy. That's why this type of community event is so important. David Brooks, last week, I don't know if you who read David Brooks, last week he wrote this editorial. And the title is, Why More People in the World Are Feeling Hopeful Except Us. Why more people in the world are feeling hopeful except us. And he goes on to talk about how nations with the highest standards of living are seeing the greatest decline in well-being. The U.S. well-being is still the highest, but its trends on hope are not good. Many countries don't do well economically, but they're very well socially and spiritually. Countries with rising living standards have strong traditional social arrangement and value systems, but if the value is economic gain, that can be done at the expense of meaning and community. And he summarized it by saying that Americans have become so obsessed with economic success that we've neglected the social and moral conditions that undergird human flourishing. Schools teach more about professional knowledge than they do social and spiritual knowledge. And prevailing values of worship, they worship individual choice and undermine the core commitments that precede choice. That is our love of family, our love of neighborhood, our love of community, and our love of country. And also, the truth is how we ended it. Why am I telling you that? Because I think, like I said, looking out and seeing so many people come together tonight demonstrates your willingness to come together as a body is so important now more than ever. Because that sense of hope, I can tell you, is going to be coming up from the bottom, not from the top, as we've seen and as we've felt, unfortunately. I say that because our politics are not working well at the top. Partisanship pervades our policymaking, and policy is driven by politics and personality, not by the people affected by our work. And I've seen this in the last few months. I've seen this in my time in Congress, but I've seen this now more than ever, especially before August, in which the focus in Congress was the reconciliation law, that major tax bill that was passed through reconciliation purposes. Now, the way I describe it is that bill has some good, it has some bad, but it's got a lot of ugly in it, to be honest with you, especially when it comes to our health care and our national debt. And the summary of that bill, if I can, gives tax breaks, especially for billionaires, of $4 trillion in extensions of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. To pay for it, they cut benefits for working families, including up to $1 trillion in Medicaid and SNAP nutrition programs. They terminated clean energy incentives, especially for solar, wind, and electric vehicles. They add $150 billion for the administration's deportation policies. It raised the debt limit by $5 trillion, and over 10 years it will add $3.8 trillion to our national debt. Now, one of the reasons why I voted against it, ladies and gentlemen, is because reconciliation was a purely partisan process. The majority party did not even enter into any negotiations whatsoever with my party, the minority party. None at all. None at all. Why? Because that's the process, in the sense that you still got to pass it with the majority in the House, but in the Senate, for reconciliation, you don't need 60 votes. You just need a majority. The Republican majority has a majority over there, and so they were able to pass it on their own without any negotiations whatsoever. Now, we offered a number of amendments, of course, and they were all rejected. Now, look, some of the good and some of the bad is that it made individual taxes permanent, at least some of the tax brackets, and when it comes to the businesses, there's some good business incentives. But to sum it up, the reconciliation bill has tax provisions that are geared towards the top. And that someone making $1 million will get over $100,000 in tax breaks a year. That's $250 a day. Yet, with a family earning $50,000, they will only get $250 of a tax break a year. That's 68 cents a day. Some of the ugly really, though, comes down to health care, unfortunately, and that it limits federal contributions to state Medicaid programs. It restricts state-directed payments for Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, and it mandates work and reporting requirements for Medicaid. Now look, as you can tell based on my background, I'm not afraid of work. I think work does bring dignity. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. But this is not about work. This is about the burdens that lead people to get kicked off of Medicaid. There's a reason why the federal Medicaid program does not have worker reporting requirements. And states have tried this. Arkansas, Georgia, Michigan. And they all did not work, but they cost an exorbitant amount to administer the program that keeps track of that. And the majority's vision was of these 20 or 30-year-old males playing video games in their mom's basement. They never talked, though, about the disabled, the 2/3 of seniors who are on Medicaid, who are in nursing homes, and the 1 in 10 veterans that are on Medicaid. These types of provisions, based on what the experts say, what we've seen in states who have tried to implement them, cause people to get kicked out of Medicaid. In fact, the Congressional Nonpartisan Budget Office said that 11.8 million will get kicked off Medicaid by 2034. Additionally, these provisions make it tough for rural hospitals that rely on Medicaid for 20% of their total revenue. And those are the hospitals that will razor thin operating margin. It will cause them to close. It will cause communities to suffer. And guess what? Hospitals in urban areas like San Jose will be impacted because guess where all those people will go? They'll go here. So it's been a tough bill. Now, another part of the ugly, as I said, is the debt and deficit that it grows. Current debt right now is $36 trillion. 36 trillion, okay? A few years ago, the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania did an analysis of our economy in the long term. Every single model that they did showed a crashing economy unless we take steps to reduce our debt. The problem is that reconciliation bill did the exact opposite. Now the problem with our debt is that as our debt grows, our interest rates will remain high. That will crowd out public investment. That will prevent government investment as we pay more on interest rates rather than on the United States. We've already started down that path. As we pay more to service our debt, that $36 trillion debt, than we do for Medicaid, for Medicare, and on our defense. The only thing that we pay more into is our Social Security. Now, near-term issues are going to create our higher interest rates, higher mortgage rates, higher inflation, and ultimately it's going to be a drag on the growth in our economy. That means it will create long-term issues with fiscal costs from a huge bill without any revenue to pay for it, with these tariffs that are creating a huge uncertainty in our economy, and all of which will lead to a gradual degradation of our economy. That will mean that we will have to take extreme measures at one point or the other. Extreme measures mean high taxes, mean less services. As I say, it means European taxes without European services. The reconciliation law will define our fiscal policy over the next decade, I'm sorry to say. And that same Congressional Budget Office, once again, nonpartisan, estimates that the law will transfer wealth from the bottom 10% of income to the top 10% of income in our nation. It will decrease the middle working class. And I believe that's exactly who we should be focused on. Working families, people who live here, people who come here, people who work hard, people who play by the rules. Government should be doing everything possible to give them opportunities to give their families a better life. How do we do that? We do that by getting back to government. We do that by doing our damn jobs. We do that by legislating. We do that by not worrying about releasing the Epstein files. Why wouldn't you release them if you protect the victims? We do that by trusting economic data and not firing the messenger if you don't like that data. I mean, if you fire a person for bad data, how in the future are you going to trust that office when it issues good data? I don't understand this. That's what we're dealing with. And that's all that's going on right now. And so it's easy to be down on the United States Congress because what's going on at the top. But I can tell you, despite the politics and the personality, I do not let that affect my values. I try not to let it affect my ability to govern. This fall will be tough. We have a budget deadline coming up in September, and as we can foresee, is a possible government shutdown. We have redistricting going on, potentially going on at this point, among other things. However, I stand here and I tell you, based on what I know and what I see every day in Congress, is that there are certain things to be hopeful for. Okay? There are certain things to be hopeful for. I do believe that we need to start addressing our debt and deficit. Because the question that I ask is, how much longer can the greatest debtor in the world continue to call itself the greatest country in the world? And we can answer that when we have a fiscal commission. A fiscal commission mandates Democrats and Republicans coming to the table and talking about everything on the table to reduce our debt and deficit. And then the next step is to ensure that members of Congress vote on it. That is a fiscal commission. I was proud to be one of 3 Democrats to have voted for that in the Budget Committee. And yes, I got the crap kicked out of me by people on my left because they thought I was going to touch Social Security. The fact is that if we don't do anything, Social Security Trust Fund is going to expire in 2034. So we must do something with that. And we can start by having a fiscal commission. And right now I can tell you there are Democrats. And yes, even though there are many Republicans who voted to increase our debt with the reconciliation package, they are starting to realize how important it is to talk about the debt and deficit, and we're having those conversations about another fiscal commission, or at least putting it on the floor for a vote. I believe we can address the number 1 issue for the 19th Congressional District, affordable housing, or the lack of affordable housing. I believe the federal government should start to play a bigger role when it comes to that issue, which was traditionally a local issue. I believe we can do that, especially based on my time on the Ways and Means Committee that has purview over the tax code. I believe that we can address affordable housing issues through my legislation that I've introduced and will continue to push. The More Homes on the Market Act. You know what this addresses, and you know the situation in which you have a couple or somebody who's been in their home since the 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. You know the price of that home is not through that roof. You know that they've grown out of that home, and they want to sell that home. But what happens when they sell that home?
Capital gains.
Exactly. They get absolutely hammered on capital gains. I wrote a simple bipartisan bill with Mike Kelly from Pennsylvania that doubles the numbers. Because right now there was a 1996 law that basically said that you can get an exemption up to $250 if you're a single filer, $500,000 for a joint filer. Mike and I wrote a bill saying double those numbers. Double those numbers. We're getting traction. We actually had the president talk about capital gains on home sales a couple weeks ago. We think ours is a more reasonable bill, and we're going to be figuring out a way to pay for it. Middle income housing tax credit. Look, we have a lot of people who work in the 19th Congressional District, but they don't live here. They commute in to our district. And look, I'm all for low-income housing tax credits, LIHTC. We got that. We know that. But you know what? There's a lot of people in this district that don't qualify for LIHTC because they make too much. So they have to end up buying a home out in the valley or down in San Benito County or outside of here. I believe that we need to make sure that we have a tax credit for the development of middle-income housing. Once again, bipartisan bill, Mike Kelly from Ohio, to basically do this and pass that type of tax credit. As we're seeing, this is how affordable housing isn't just a coastal issue anymore. Affordable housing is an American issue. It's really affecting all parts of the country, as I'm seeing with the people that I'm working with. And then I think we have a first-time homebuyers tax credit, something that my wife and I took advantage of back in 2003 when we bought our first house, based on that $10,000 tax credit from the federal government that you got when you did that. I wrote a bill to bring it back and make it $15,000. These are simple steps. These are simple steps that I'm going to continue to be pushing for in the United States Congress, especially on the Ways and Means Committee. Permitting reform. Obviously, we're saying about it for housing, but we also have to have it for infrastructure, for transmission lines. If we want to do anything on clean energy, we have to make sure that we have permitting reform. We do a great job passing laws in Congress. We do a horrible job implementing laws in Congress. I'm proud to be a part of the largest investment in human history to reduce our carbon output in the second worst named bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, okay? Because that made sure that we incentivize the pivot to clean energy. But what we realized is that we couldn't implement it because we didn't have the infrastructure to do that. Part of the reason is because of the weight that it takes for permitting reform. There's permitting reform that we're talking about right now, and I think that's something we can address going forward. Medicare reimbursement rates, oh my goodness. Talk about doctors who are, you think we live in the most beautiful congressional district, you would think doctors would be clamoring to live here. Well, they come here, they serve for about a year, and then they get the heck out of here because they can't afford it. A big part of that is Medicare doesn't reimburse them properly. And basically, it hasn't kept up with inflation. I wrote a bipartisan bill with Greg Murphy from North Carolina to basically make it keep up with 50% of inflation and offset the 2% cut in Medicaid that is planned right now. And yes, immigration reform. Immigration reform is something we can do, okay? Look, the border has gone down. The president needs to declare that a victory. That will give political cover for Republicans to then start to have meaningful conversations on immigration reform, at least in the public, because we're having those conversations right now. Look, ladies and gentlemen, there are people here that you know that do jobs that contribute to our economy and our community and our country that no American will do. In agriculture, in construction, in nursing homes, in healthcare industry. These are the people who have come here to live the American dream and who have played by the rules. They should at least be allowed the opportunity to stay here. Throughout my 8 years, I've worked on this issue. I've fought for this issue. It is immigration reform, I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is the most policy complex and politically complicated issue I've ever worked on. Especially with this president right now. I do believe that you are seeing, though, a tide. Once the numbers have been dropping at the border, you're starting to see more Republicans willing to take a stand forward and actually do it. I believe if we can get around Stephen Miller in the White House, I think we can do this. But I firmly believe he's the problem. He's the problem. I really do. And the president has to stand up to him. The president has to do what's right on immigration reform. Because there are members of Congress on both sides that help that out. Trade. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 gives a constitutionally enumerated power to Congress over foreign commerce. For decades, however, Congress has granted vast trade discretion to presidents, mainly for political purposes. Congress didn't want to make the tough choices, so they let the president do it. Pretty weak, if you ask me. We need to start standing up to this administration and start taking back our authority under the Constitution when it comes to trade. Because right now, this is what happens when you give up that power. You have a president who has a 40-year fetish with tariffs, and he imposes them, and it creates the chaos and uncertainty that we are seeing, not just here in this country, but throughout this world. And it's time that Congress actually stands up and does something, especially when it's given the constitutional authority to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, I do believe in the institution of Congress. This is the best job I've ever had. And I've had some good ones. Being a prosecutor in Oakland, being on the game team in Monterey, being an intelligence officer in Afghanistan with the Special Forces Group. I've had some good jobs. This is the best job I've ever had. I mean that wholeheartedly. I love the service that I'm able to provide to people like you, to this place that we call home. I love the way that when you do that, you can actually restore people's faith in Congress and in the federal government. And let me tell you, there's some good people that I work with in Congress, that I will continue to work with in Congress because that's my job. As I have always said, I will work with anybody who helps me further and fight for the values of the people of the 19th Congressional District. But I also will fight anybody who threatens those values of the people of the 19th Congressional District. Now look, a number of people just want me to yell and scream, okay? They want me to get arrested. They want me to do anything and everything. And look, I get it because emotions are so very, very high right now. But what I've seen, especially from my constituents throughout the 19th Congressional District, not just in one town, but throughout the very diverse 19th Congressional Districts, ethnically and politically, is that people want results. They want people to govern. They want to live their lives and know that when needed, they can rely on the federal government. That's why I've won elections. That's why I'm the #1 performing Democrat in California. That means I've had more Democrats and Republicans vote for me in this district than any other Democratic district in California. It's getting tough, though. Getting tough, no doubt. I couldn't believe, I'll be honest with you, I couldn't believe Vice President Harris said the reason she's not running for governor is because the system's broken. We need people when the system's broken. We need people now more than ever that are willing to lean in to the broken system. Because that's what we do in this country. We have to constantly remind ourselves at times. I get the narcotic of nostalgia. I get that we like to look back and think of the good times. Trust me, I have kids. When I look at them now, all I see is the good things. It's like my time in the Navy. Whenever I talk to somebody about my time in the Navy, I don't think of the BS that you had to deal with being in the military. And there's a lot of it. Those of you who serve understand what I'm saying. I think of the good stuff. But the fact is when you look at the history of this country, the tough times are the rule, not the exception. And it's what you do during these tough times, no matter who's in charge, is what defines us as a country, as a democracy, and yes, even as a community. That's the most important thing. When I think about that, though, you gotta have one quality. And I think we all know it. Some of you have heard me tell this fable, but it's a fable my dad often tells. And that it was about a priest and a rabbi who go to a boxing match. They want to get to know each other better. Right before the boxing match, one of the boxers makes the sign of the cross. And the rabbi nudges the priest and says, "What the hell does that mean?" And the priest says, "Not a damn thing if he can't fight." Look, you guys, we can bless ourselves all we want. We can bless ourselves all we want, but if we're not willing to fight for what we want, we ain't gonna go anywhere. We gotta fight right now. We'll continue to fight right now. But for me, most importantly, I will always, always fight for the people of the 19th Congressional District. You give me hope to do that. Save you tonight. I hope that I give you hope in the future of our Congress. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So if you have any questions, you'll let us raise your hand so that we can pass the numbers out. I see we have #1 already. We can get a microphone to #1 here. And then pass it over there. Thank you all for that cooperation.
Congressman Panetta, thank you again for coming tonight. And I really appreciate the fact, on a personal note, I appreciate the fact that you come up here to us in the northern ends of 101. Our prior congressman never showed up. On a really personal note, I'd like to give a shout out to your staffer in room 200, Darcy, who did a fantastic job, my wife and I, when we were in Washington, D.C. in June, getting us hooked up with a private tour by your intern, Max, of the Capitol. So anyone here who goes to Washington, D.C. should definitely talk with Congressman Panetta's office about getting a fantastic private tour of the Capitol and tickets to get into both the House and Senate chambers. And it was a really fantastic experience for me, so thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And my one question, the one I always ask you every time you see me, is SMRs. TVA in Tennessee is starting the first one. Has there been any movement in Congress about SMRs, small modular nuclear reactors? Thank you.
Yeah.
My issue.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, and I appreciate your expertise on this issue. I think this is an important issue. I can't say, just to answer your question first and foremost, I can't say there's been any movement. However, there's a lot of discussion on small modular nuclear reactors that are safe, that are portable, and that are very, very powerful. I say that not just from the energy folks, I say that from the clean energy folks. I say that because we know that if we're going to make the transition to clean energy, first and foremost, one of the cleanest forms of energy is nuclear power, but also it's going to be needed as we go forward to other forms of energy. Now look, I'm very disappointed, extremely disappointed that the one big beautiful bill, the worst named bill, the OBBB basically gets rid of tax credits for solar and wind. And those of you who want an electric vehicle, that starts in September, that tax credit, federal tax credit, is done. Trust me, I see more Teslas now in Almaden Valley than any other place in the district. You lucky you bought them already. But that gets rid of it. So I just think that we need to be continuing to have these types of discussions on not just nuclear, but geothermal. I think it has to be an all of the above discussion, and that includes wind and thermal and other clean forms of energy. And also ways in which we can transition to that too. So I think it's very, very important that you continue to bring that up. I appreciate that. And I can tell you, based on people like you who brought it up to their members of Congress, they're definitely thinking about that that's a way to the future when it comes to clean energy.
So thanks very much for your effort to see the post office replaced. Until that happens, though, could you help us to get a mailbox? The entire country club area, at least, has no mailboxes anymore.
How did you get it before? Please tell me.
The mailbox was at the post office, and after the fire went over, they took the mailbox away.
Yeah. Interesting. And that's just, you're just talking about a simple drop box?
That's right.
I took them all away.
Really?
There are none in this entire area.
The answer is I will definitely look into this. This is something that's part of my letter send. There has to be a temporary remedy for people like you to at least drop mail off. We're not even talking.
They could put it at the community center.
Exactly.
They could put it at the shopping center.
Are there any other drop boxes throughout Almaden Valley?
Yes.
Well, they're pretty far away.
What I would like, sir, is I'd like country in.
Yeah, right by the country inn on Camden Avenue.
Maybe we're figuring this out for this hearing. But sir, what I would ask is Emmanuel is going to come over to you and get your information. We will call you and then drill down on that issue, where the drop-offs was. Try to find areas if there's other drop-offs that might help. And if not, we'll push on the USPS to have another drop-off, if that's okay.
Great.
Okay.
There is a place where you can drop your mail in Almaden. Behind the donut shop is Postal Annex. Inside, he has 2 boxes on the floor, one for letters, one for very small packages, and the post office picks up every single afternoon there. So if you're not comfortable leaving it in your mailbox for your mailman to pick up, you can drop it off there.
Where?
It's the post office.
Behind the donut.
Behind the donut shop.
Behind the donut shop.
Oh, you mean that place?
Safeway Center.
It's literally called the Postal Annex. Postnet. Okay, Postnet. Behind the donut shop. And I got that. Yeah, Postnet behind the donut shop. Once again, sir, we will contact you and at least try to drill down on this a little bit more to help. Like I said, worst thing we can do is ask the post office to put something out there. I actually think they should put something out there temporarily, to be honest, in the location of the post office. So,
just left it there.
Understood. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Okay, let me introduce my opponent, ladies and gentlemen. This is Sean Dougherty. He's a good guy. He's doing what's right. Let me make one thing clear. Nobody's entitled to this office. whatsoever. I'm not entitled to it. It's up to you. Okay, let's make that clear. So I appreciate Sean being here. He ran a good campaign last time. Didn't make the general election, but he's back at it, and I want to thank him for that. I want to thank him for participating in our democracy. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you for the introduction, Representative. So, according to a YouGov poll that was conducted at the beginning of this month, a plurality of Americans believe that what Israel is doing in Palestine is a genocide. And given the makeup of Congressional District 19, I think it's safe to guess that a majority of your constituents believe it's a genocide. Overwhelmingly, Democrats believe that's the case. Now, your top donor, your top campaign donor in 2024, according to OpenSecrets.org, was AIPAC, the Israel lobby. And I think a lot of your constituents can't help but wonder, is there a connection between those donations and your position in supporting Israel as it conducts this genocide, as I believe most of your constituents see it? And I wonder if we could call on you to take a pledge to stop accepting those campaign donations. Given your name recognition, I don't think it's even necessary for you to take that money to win. You're almost untouchable. Why do you need this money? It doesn't make any sense. You don't need it. Stop taking it.
Got it. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. Look, let me make one thing clear. What's going on in Gaza is horrible. It's horrific. I think we can all agree to that. One of the things that I am fortunate to do is travel to certain areas that not many people want to go to. I've been to the Middle East a number of times. In fact, I visited Israel more than any other place that I've been to, 6 times. I've been into the West Bank. I spoke with leadership of Israel. I spoke with leadership of the Palestinian Authority. It's my responsibility, once again, to show up, to do that. In fact, I was there in Israel on October 10th of 2023. We were supposed to go there. We were in Saudi Arabia on October 6th, and we woke up to the nightmare of October 7th, of what happened. We weren't sure if we were going to get into Israel, but we called in and they said, yes, you need to go. Please come, please come. And so they wanted us to come, and so we couldn't fly in, and so we had to drive in, and we had to get a bunch of security and support. And we went in, and we spoke with leadership, and we spoke with victims, I'll never forget, victims' families, a victim, a daughter, whose father had been kidnapped during the atrocities of October 7th. And I'll never forget her not worrying about him being alive, but worrying about him having his heart medication. She knew that he was still alive. Just wanted to make sure that he would survive. And so there were certain impressions that were on me based on my travels to the Middle East that I still carry with me, that I think are very, very important. And I believe that Israel has to continue to defend itself, but it's got to a point where this war must end. This war must end. I firmly believe that. Now, there have been a number of negotiations that, fortunately, the United States has continued to lead on. And so I believe that we need to still be engaged in the Middle East, still be engaged with Israel, still be engaged with their self-defense, still be engaged with Qataris and the Egyptians, still be engaged with them in dealing with Hamas. Because there has to be a deal for a ceasefire in order to release the hostages and stop the atrocities that are going on in Gaza. I firmly believe that. So I can tell you, Sean, absolutely nothing of that belief has to do with people who give to me. In fact, everybody who gives to me, they buy into my values. I don't buy into their values. They buy into the values of the 19th Congressional District. And if you get it right, it's not AIPAC, it's individuals who are giving to me. Please understand the difference between that when you speak that rhetoric that you do about my donations. I'm very proud of my donations because, like I said, they're making sure that I am here to support the 19th Congressional District. And so, once again, the war needs to stop. Things need to stop. There needs to be peace. The hostages need to be released. And let me tell you, the only thing that influences me in my determinations and what I do is my experience and these people right here. Next question.
Okay, I'm a resident here in your district, not a campaign. I'm not running for office, I may never. But I also am very concerned about this war in Gaza and Israel's reaction. I understand for decades the U.S. has been the staunch supporter of Israel. Israel has a right to defend itself, but do the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves? If you met with the grieving families, the fact is, 61,000 Gazans have been killed. The entire 92% of their housing has been destroyed in Gaza. The entire 2 million plus people, 92% of their housing has been destroyed. That's not an accident. It also is well documented that the strategy of Israel to starve the Gazans, it's well documented, and all you have to just go out and Google and look for it, okay? Benjamin Netanyahu has not kept it a secret. It's a deliberate strategy to get rid of the Palestinians. By almost any definition, that's genocide. And, I lose sleep over the fact that my tax dollars, thanks to you, continuing to spend, and ship arms to Israel to cover 70% of the cost of this war has been paid by you guys. 70% of the destruction of Gaza and the lives lost. And if we want the war to end, we have to stop shipping the weapons to Israel. Just yesterday, Israel targeted some journalists. Of course, we don't hear much news, of the people in Gaza because Israel doesn't allow international journalists there. But the local journalists have been targeted. More have been killed. Yes. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is just last night they murdered journalists that were getting the word out about what's going on. And now the public is understanding that this is not just Israel defending itself. They're trying to drive people out. It's genocide. And the only way to stop the war is to cut the weapons off to them. So are you willing to cut the weapons off to them? Are you going to stop sending them money?
Thank you. Thanks for that, Tom. And like I said, what's going on over there is horrible. The war needs to stop. There needs to be a temporary ceasefire. Hamas needs to negotiate with Israel, and the hostages need to be released. Now, I believe that we've gotten as far as we have with the negotiations because the U.S. has been involved in that. It's the United States leadership that led to the temporary ceasefire that it was. It's the United States leadership that continues to bring both sides to the table. And I believe that that's what they have to continue to do. If we just pulled stakes, if we just said, nope, forget it, I think Israel, based on what I saw in my time of being in the country, having these conversations with both sides, I believe that Israel will continue to act. At least we are there to set the parameters on Israel, and we continue to do that.
They'll run out of arms. They won't be able to do it. And you should know better. Shame on you for lying to the American public. Ooh, that's right.
Thank you, sir.
It is.
First of all, I would also like to thank you, Congressman Panetta, your office. Set a wonderful tour in D.C. and was very knowledgeable about not just the sites, the tours, like you see what was going on in the world and the Congress at the time.
Good to hear.
Yeah, it was really interesting. My question, though, and my concern is I feel like Congress is just ceded so much power to the executive branch that it's starting to feel like it's a see the job. Like there's the co-equal branches of government are not working. And specifically, I'm kind of wondering what your position is on this gerrymandering war. It's my understanding if we engage, we the Democrats, that eventually the Republicans will win that war. So I'm just curious what your position is on that.
You really kind of set up my answer. Because right now, we understand that we're supposed to have a system of checks and balances. And there's a reason why Congress is Article 1 of the Constitution. Because our founding fathers knew it should be the people and the representatives on the ground that should have the most power. But unfortunately, you have this majority in Congress with Speaker Johnson that's clearly just absolutely abrogated all of our authority. Absolutely been obsequious to this president in giving up our authority. It shames me to say that. It shames me to stand in front of you as a member of that institution that I still and will continue to revere and work in and believe in. And that's why we continue to push the majority to stand up to this executive branch on many of the issues that I talked about and will continue to. When people ask me, when I'm throughout the 19th Congressional District, no matter where I am, what can we do? What can we do? There's going to be something they can do coming up here. And that is with this redistricting. Now, right now, Donald Trump has basically pressured the Texas Republican legislature to redistrict in the middle of the time that they were supposed to. He basically sees that he can get 5 congressional seats, therefore win the midterm elections in 2026, and therefore not have to deal with a Democratic-led Congress by Hakeem Jeffries. And so he pushes and grinds this Texas government to have this redistricting. And they're going to do it, it appears. That's why the Democrats there in Texas have fled. That's why they're holding it up. I don't know how much longer that's going to be. But that's also why you then have Governor Newsom and the state legislature about to put forward a redistricting plan that is not going to be determined by the legislature. It's going to be determined by all of you. It's going to be an election. It has to be an election because it's in the Constitution that we redistrict with an independent redistricting commission. That will not be the case. And the vote will be up to you to determine whether or not you want California to redistrict to counter the 5 seats. I understand that it's unsavory. But I also understand that if you're so incensed by it, then why aren't you speaking up about what Texas is doing to rig the system? What Donald Trump is doing to rig the system? And so I believe that if this is what we have to do, people have to get involved and vote on this in November. Because it's going to be special.
Make it so eventually as all the cards finally fall and we score it all up, that the Democrats will lose that battle. I mean, you represent some red area.
Absolutely, trust me, I know.
So if it were flipped, they would be basically getting rid of you. I mean, fortunately, you're in a Democratic state, but if you were in Texas, you'd be sunk.
Let me tell you, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure the 19th district stays intact. Everything I can. I love this district. This is a good district. Like I said, it's diversity, it's beauty, it's bounty. I'm just honored to be here. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it stays the same. So trust me on that. But like I said, it's gotten to a point, unfortunately, where we can't let the executive branch override Article 1. We can't let the executive branch rig the system. And we're going to have to fight fire with fire on this one.
Thank you, Congressman Panetta. I'd like to thank you for coming. And also, I just want to say we've been doing this for a while. I did many visits and many calls on the Hill with your dad, Leon Panetta, from advocating on behalf of a lot of tech companies important in this valley and other areas than that. But I felt like we were treated fairly and he listened and we moved forward. But we moved forward by partnering with both industry, understanding the technology, and at some points understanding how to make that safe. That it would not be used against us. So one of the things that I wanted to ask about, you serve on 3 very powerful committees.
Can I just digress real quick? I'm not on the Armed Services Committee. It pains me to say that, but unfortunately I didn't get a waiver. I'm on the Ways and Means Committee, which is quote unquote a committee. You're not supposed to be on other committees if you're on that committee.
Right.
I was able to get a waiver last term because we have just as many members as the Republican, or just very close, 3 less. They have all the members, they have all the spots, and so they were asking members to get on committees. We were keeping people off committee, and I had that. There were no waivers for you to get back on. So Ways, Means, and Budget. So just to make that clear, I didn't want to misrepresent anything.
And that's part of the problem, I think, at some point. So I want to talk about governance. And governance in that area, you talked about some priorities that we could do that seem to be sort of bread and butter to this area. We could talk about middle-class housing. We could talk about some of those things. But right now, we're in a position to where we have to have one thing and deliver, one thing to be able to move forward. People are losing hope with our Democratic representatives and our representatives that they have a plan and that they're effective and that we can get somewhere. I think in this area for us to regain any kind of representation for the group that is here, we have to have a lot of focus on those things that will matter. So we've talked about the data centers and the need for utilities and power and an area in that. We've talked about the leadership, but we also have things like standards for AI. We have things in the area where we've talked about immigration reform. We've talked about some of these permitting reform. Which one of those things would you focus your time on and partner with us to advocate for the constituents in this room? Some of them are very important. We can't stop what is going on without immigration reform. We haven't had immigration reform in the U.S. for more years than I can remember.
1986.
Yeah.
Look, that's not going to be up to me. It's going to be up to you. I mean, I've given you my list of what I'm focused on, and I can tell you, like I said, the #1 issue that I've seen throughout the 19th Congressional District is affordable housing, or the lack of. I think it's very, very important. And being on the Ways and Means, I can actually have an effect on helping people and incentivizing the sales and the buying of individual family homes. We have another bill called the Rent Relief Act to make sure that those who pay over 1/3 of their income to rent get a tax credit as well. So it's not just homeowners, it's renters too. But like I said, I can't limit it to one. That's the problem with it. It's kind of the problem with Congress. They expect you to be an expert on everything real quick. But my attitude is just make sure I prioritize per the values of the 19th Congressional District. And so, like I said, I went through a number of those things. Housing, immigration reform, the environment, I think are the top 3.
Hi. Thank you so much for bringing up the significance of the authority and accountability of Congress. I think the integrity of Congress has been in question since the U.S. government started, I believe, starting with Bush Sr., to propagate wars and military actions, which is our government's new word for wars, around the world without the approval of Congress. What I'd like to know is, have you or have you discussed with other representatives how to assert that power back, and why is the war industrial complex and defense contractors are allowed to urge our government to get into war, including shipping weapons and bombs to many countries for decades? And why isn't Congress taking their responsibility seriously in representing what your constituents demand, which is every bomb is robbing the U.S. citizens and residents of necessities and needs that are being unmet, have gone unmet for decades? Free education, free healthcare, national healthcare. 25 out of the top 26 richest countries on the planet have a national form of healthcare. We do not, the #1 richest country. It's shameful that our representatives either do not want or don't have the capability to defend their constituents and do what they need to address our needs. This goes far beyond an important post office. That's important too, but really the health and well-being of our communities are a question here. So would you be able to push for that as you have for other bills and legislation?
Great, thank you. I appreciate that comment. I think a big sign of the push that we did was on the reconciliation bill. The pushback to basically let the people of this district know what I did in, I'd say, most of my town halls that I've done, and basically letting them know how destructive that bill was to our health care, how destructive it was to our education by reducing some student loans, how destructive it was to our nutrition programs as it makes significant cuts to the SNAP program and school lunch program. Unfortunately, we're in the minority right now. So please know that just because it didn't happen, and I'm sorry that you weren't attuned to what I was doing, but please trust me that I was doing everything I can to make sure that bill failed. Unfortunately, it comes down to the numbers. And unfortunately, right now, we're in the minority. That's why 2026, I believe, is very, very important for people to vote in. I have to be careful because this is in an official format. To vote in to ensure that there are members of Congress, there is a majority that's willing to not just push back, but actually pass meaningful legislation to show our authority. That is what I've been doing in Congress, and basically this time, especially this term, and that we've had legislation, we've had investigation, we're making sure that there's litigation, where there's communication, and ultimately, ma'am, it's going to be about mobilization. When it comes to asserting our power over the War Powers Act, please know that once again, Article 1 gives the power to enact war to Congress. Article 2 gives the President, the executive branch, emergency powers based on certain qualifications that are met. Immediately when the President bombed Iran, we then basically submitted legislation that takes back our power under the War Powers Authority. Unfortunately, that bill has not gone anywhere, once again, because we're in the minority. Again, making sure that there is a Congress, there is a legislative branch that actually has the will and the fortitude to stand up in the way we, to the executive branch, and the way we do that is making sure that we have the majority.
Earlier in your comments, you made reference to the immigrants that have been in our country for long periods of time. And someone alluded to how they were being treated or not treated well. And I just want to take two sentences that I think are extremely impactful. Hold on one second. Terrible things are happening outside. Poor, helpless people are being dragged out of their homes. Families are torn apart. Men, women, and children are separated. Children come home from school to find that their parents have disappeared. Anne Frank, 1943. That sounds sobering. And the second, prison without due process is a concentration camp.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. And I mean, we're dealing with an administration right now that has a deportation policy that at first was targeted. to felons. Yeah, to felons and gang members at first. But unfortunately, now it's basically a wide net, meaning everybody and anybody. And that's what we have to do our best to continue to push back on and provide oversight. That's why 2 weeks ago I went and visited one of these detention facilities in Adelanto, California, Victorville, California. Trust me, once again, ladies and gentlemen, we have the most beautiful congressional district. But that being said, I wanted to make sure that I was in there and to ensure that those people who were there in that facility were not only being cared for correctly, accurately, but that they were getting due process. And so I visited the 5 immigration courts. Actually, I had to push my way into the courts. They weren't going to let me go in, but I pushed my way in. And I asked hard questions about what the hell's going on here. How are you ensuring that they're getting due process? I spoke with the ACLU attorneys that were there ensuring due process for those individuals who were in that facility and the deportation process. That's my job. Like I said, I show up, be it overseas or be it here in California, the largest detention facility we have, to make sure that people are getting due process. I believe it's going to take a lot more than me showing up at Adelanto, okay? It's really going to take other members doing that same thing and getting in there and asking tough questions. It's going to, I visited the border or a detention facility 7 times in my Congress, in my congressional career. I made sure to go to the border, to visit the border, to visit these facilities, because that's my responsibility. Because it gives me the evidence to make my argument. Look, for better or for worse, I was a prosecutor, as I said before, this position. But it allows me to make my argument based on the evidence. A lot of my colleagues just like to stand up and scream. Okay, we know that on both sides of the aisle. That's why I work so hard to get the evidence, because I base my arguments on the evidence. Because I wanted to see what was going on and press these ICE officials and press these private prison managers that they were treating these people in detention with care and with due process. And that's my job, and I continue to do it.
Do you think they are?
I think basically what I saw, especially in those courtrooms, was working, but look, that was just a small example of what was going on. What I saw is not indicative of the entire policy. What I saw in Adelanto, California, is not what's going on at the border in Texas in these temporary facilities or in Alligator Alcatraz. So, this is just what, like I said, I continue to show up. I plan on going to the border again to making sure that they know that there are members of Congress who are going to hold them accountable. And I will continue to do that.
First, I'd like to say I appreciate you putting yourself out there. I'm going to tell you something that you may not like, or you may like. My family arrived in California in 1799. Coastal Island in the Carolinas in 1638. I'm the 40th generation of an unbroken lineage dating to 750 in the highlands of Ireland and Scotia. Now, if you want to talk about genocide, I suggest you go look at William of Orange. Now, with that said, we're all addressing an issue called the demographic bomb, which means there are not enough youth to take care of the elderly people. So while we're all arguing about this tit for tat and this isn't doing that, how are you addressing the demographic bomb?
And just to get some clarification, sir.
Demographic bomb is that we're out of excuse. We've got an upside down pyramid. We've got a whole bunch of elderly people to take care of. We've got a whole top tier pyramid, of an upside down pyramid of elderly people to take care of. And yes, I worked in the healthcare area as a registered nurse and licensed psychiatric technician. I know how these systems work. Okay? I've been working with Governor Brown starting in 2008 with the CDFA, and I was down in your region in Paso Robles, and we were converting to an agro-technological paradigm shift.
I appreciate that.
And with that, all of that said, so far all I've heard is people bitching and moaning about other places rather than what's going on here.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that comment. I'll be honest with you, I'm not an expert in demographics and what we can do to have more young people. Obviously, I don't want to say fornicate more, but I'm serious. I'm not an expert, and that's what I rely on. I'd love to get back to you with a more professional answer, to be honest with you. But I also believe, I think the issue though, sir, and you talk about doing jobs to take care of people. If you look at some of these nursing homes and our care facilities, it's immigrants.
I've been in them. They're horrible.
It's immigrants who are doing that work because unfortunately no Americans, very few Americans will do that line of work. And so, but until we get that curve of young people going up again, I believe we have to have immigration reform.
And we're ready to do that.
Thank you.
With agro-tech, cycles of life, live, work, rehabilitated, regenerated, reintegrated, vocational, agricultural,
live, work program, in the true definition of the word asylum and orphanage.
Thank you.
To re-assimilate people.
It's been said that we lost the election because the Republicans had control of the narrative. And part of having control of the narrative is to continue the narrative for our side. And what I'm hearing a lot in Congress is people are saying we're giving a lot to the rich people, which is true, but it's hard to fit it all in a narrative unless you say what is the truth. At the end of World War II, 118 to 121% was the debt to GDP, which is the gross domestic product. That was the worst in history. Now, what did we do? We paid it down steadily. We had the Korean War. We paid it down. We put men on the moon. We paid it down. We gave people food who needed food, and we paid it down. We got Medicaid and paid it down. We improved Medicare and paid it down. We have given people who don't have money to heat or cool their houses money and paid it down. Yes, the question is, when Reagan came in and gave the tax cuts, that paying down stopped. It started going up. Clinton was the only person that got a little bubble down. Then it went back up because of everything else that they did. And then Trump came in, and it's now, it got to 124% with no war. So how do we get this narrative? Simple. We did not spend our way into debt. We got into debt because we gave money to rich people who did not need it. We gave money that we did not have to the rich people that did not need it. And that's the question, how do we keep this narrative going?
Thank you, appreciate that. And like I said, I think your point is very, very poignant, but one a lot of people aren't making. Your point is why I talked about the debt deficit tonight. Because if we don't do anything on it, I'm not going to say it's going to happen tomorrow, the next year or 5 years from now. But I'm telling you, it's going to be like a noose that's going to slowly surround us, and before we know it, we won't be able to do anything. We have to do something. The narrative actually starts with the narrative. The problem is like I said, literally and figuratively, debt is a 4-letter word in Washington, D.C. Nobody has the political will to stand up and talk about it because it's much easier to talk about spending and cutting taxes. That's why I mentioned this fiscal commission. To where, and I'm sorry to say this, it forces people to have to talk about it. Are you kidding me? This is something that we should be responsible in talking about it without a law saying we should do it. But if that's what it's going to be, if that's going to create the narrative, then that's what we need to do. It starts with a fiscal commission.
Like Republicans are saying we're in debt because of Medicaid, Medicare, and all this other spending that we're doing, and the narrative has to switch that it's giving money away.
I think it's not just about cuts, it's about revenue. We're one of the highest ranking OECD states, basically wealthiest countries, that has one of the lowest revenue. And there has to be, like I said, this is why you have this type of commission. Everything's got to be on the table. Everything's got to be on the table, and you can't be afraid to talk about it, and you have to have the political will to talk about it. That's how you get the narrative.
Thank you.
Yes.
July 4th next year will be the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution, the starting of this fabulous, fabulous country that we have. And everyone seems to be pretty depressed. I still call on customers, and you can see people are depressed. And I just would love to see some part of the government just make people feel a little happier, make them feel wonderful that they live in this country and that they're doing wonderful things instead of, you don't do it very good when you're depressed. You know, we're a happy country and we want to keep it that way. 250 years is just nothing. Look what we've done in 250 years. Our ancestors have to be flipping their graves. Mine are, they've been here from 1600 and 1630, so, I can go way back, but I just think that we need some happiness. I think it'll go a long way.
I couldn't agree with you more, but you can't just be Pollyannish about everything.
A little bit.
Absolutely, but I ultimately believe that, basically, we have to fight right now, and we have to make sure that when we do that our goal is to have this happiness. Look, don't get me wrong, I trust from my travels, I love going outside of this country because I come back with that realization what a great country this is, despite our many, many, many problems. And so, that being said though, it really has to be, the thing that makes us great is the effort that we put towards this never-ending experiment called the American democracy. And that's what we have to realize. So my happiness comes from how hard I work to be a part of this democracy. And so, like I said, I have an obligation, especially as a federal representative, to continue my service, to do my work. That's what gives me happy. That's what makes me happy. Excuse me. And like I said, this here tonight, people coming out asking me questions, some tough questions, getting on me, fine, that's my job. But to me, that's okay because that's part of our process, and that is what should make you happy as well. Knowing that at least you have this forum of community members. Like I said, on Monday night, you got better things to do. You come listen to me or your city council, man. But you're here. That makes me happy. Knowing that there's still this participatory process of local democracy. And to me, that's what gives me hope at the national level. Because our country is not about one person. It is about all of you. And so I leave here, even after getting the crap beat out of me a little bit, I leave here pretty happy, let me tell you. This is great. This is great. This is what it's about.
I'd like the government to just start talking a little bit about the 250th anniversary coming up.
Understood.
And what's made our country. Just a little bit.
And we will. Obviously, we had, we just had July 4th, but trust me, they are already talking about it in Washington, D.C., man. And you're only going to hear more about that going forward.
I haven't really heard too much about it, but that's great.
They are. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, yeah. You bet. Okay, thank you.
So
Thanks for that comment.
the last question of the night comes from a Zoom listener. And she says that with nuclear energy being clean, what do you support for the disposal of nuclear waste?
Yeah, look, this is the thing with these small, where's my expert left? The small modular reactors actually, from what I've heard and what I've read, actually have limited amounts of waste. But this is an issue, obviously, with anything nuclear, has to be the safety and the disposal of that. It's one of the issues with Diablo Canyon. I mean, look, we know the reason why the governor turned on a lot of representatives who fought to close that down, because he understood that we need that nuclear power going forward. The problem with Diablo Canyon is not that it's on an earthquake fault. The problem is that its waste is on an earthquake fault. And that's up there above it. That's the issue with it. With these small modular reactors, what I've heard, and a lot more research needs to be done, and a lot more reading needs to be done, including by me, is that the waste is limited in it, which makes it a little easier to swallow when it comes to these types of small nuclear reactors. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Applause for Congressman. Let me remind you that next month, our program will be with Santa Clara County Supervisor AVCA. Please join us on September 8th, the second Monday